Over the last couple days, there's been two different pieces of Switch news that have been developing that I want to talk about. One is a glimmer of hope for Nintendo potentially prioritizing physical games more than they currently are on the Switch, although there are some limitations there I'm curious about. And two, in slightly less good news, everything but the Switch 2, and games at least, are getting more expensive. So I want to talk about both these things, as well as give a quick shout out to today's sponsor, Arzopa. First, let's talk about physical games. This has been a bit of a sticking point for a lot of traditional physical fans of Nintendo, which I think actually has a higher ratio of people that prefer physical over digital when compared to people that regularly play on PlayStation and Xbox. And one of the things that's been happening with Switch 2 that people don't really love, game key cards. This very weird half step where it's a physical, but not really. It acts as a license, so you don't have to rely on a digital key, but at the same time, it does require actually downloading the game still in the first place. And while the concept of it alone is annoying, what's really been the issue is how many games have been doing it, and that it's been basically everything third party. There are exceptions, Cyberpunk of all things, multiple titles that are being published by Marvelous. We recently got confirmation that the upcoming Sonic Racing game, as well as the Mortal Kombat Legacy Collection, are going to be actual full games on cart. And that's basically it. Every other major third-party announcement either isn't getting any kind of physical whatsoever, or they are getting a game key card, including everything we saw at this recent Nintendo Direct, where they showed off a whole bunch of third-party publishers releasing stuff, and we found out shortly after that basically all of those titles were going to be game key cards. I've talked in a couple videos before at length about why I don't really care for game key cards, so I don't want to get too into it right now. I think the simplest way to really sum it up is just the fact that I'm not necessarily against getting games digitally, it's just if I'm going to be getting a game physically, I want it to be an actual physical copy. Otherwise, why am I even buying this version in the first place? And so, an interesting bit of news that has now arisen is that Nintendo has opened up a survey for people to tell them how they feel about physical games. It has all kinds of questions regarding why you prefer physical if you do, what is it that holds you back from buying digital versions of the games, are there certain specific situations where you're more okay with digital or physical, how do you feel about game key cards specifically, kind of splitting the difference. It goes through all these different things with different yes or no questions and a couple areas that you can also fill out your own answers. Honestly, part of the reason I wanted to make this video is just to shout out that this survey exists. And if you care about having more true physical copies of games on the Switch 2, it's probably a pretty good idea to fill this out and let Nintendo know how you feel. Hey, so quick update. It looks like sometime between me recording this video last night and this morning, Nintendo has actually now delisted the survey. So the link's out there, you can click it, but it doesn't actually do anything. So I'm still gonna put this video live because I do want to just talk about how this survey existed, and I think it's important that Nintendo be aware of how people feel about game key cards. But sadly, as far as my future shoutouts go for clicking the link to fill it out for yourself, yeah, that's just not an option anymore. One thing that does make me curious about how this could actually action things in the future is the fact that as of right now, it really is a third-party issue. Nintendo is obviously responsible for giving the option of doing a game key card versus a traditional on-the-cart option, but it is, of course, third parties who are actually making the choice to pick game key card over a traditional one, likely being because the game key card option is just cheaper to produce. And so with that in mind, it makes me very curious what actually Nintendo would be willing to do if enough people show that they want more traditional physicals, because they're doing that for their own first-party games, no problem. Donkey Kong, Mario Kart World, upcoming first-party Nintendo games, all on the cart, not a big deal. But when it comes to the third-party, I'm curious if they could choose to reduce how much they're charging for using the particular cart type, thus making more companies willing to invest in doing the on-cart option, maybe even removing game key card, which seems extremely unlikely to me in the long run, unless it was some kind of a massively overwhelming response where like no one is buying these, which I don't think is the case that's going on. Trust me, I don't have any illusions about this. I know that those of us that really care about having true physical games on the system are relatively a minority. A loud one and one that I hope Nintendo will end up listening to as far as pushing more true physicals in the future, but I'm just curious what they're actually going to do about it. So if you're interested in letting Nintendo know how you feel about this, you want to fill out the survey for yourself, I highly encourage it. I do have the link for it posted down below in the description. While you're at it, also down below in the description is a link to a handy little portable monitor that comes from today's sponsor, Arzopa. This is the portable monitor from Arzopa, a lightweight and affordable 16-inch 1080p display with a 144Hz refresh rate that is so extremely easy to transport. The monitor itself is small enough to easily fit in a backpack, staying nice and protected within an included sleeve, and it also has a sturdy built-in kickstand that you can use to set it up in a landscape or even portrait orientation. When plugged into its own power source, you can use it with traditional gaming consoles like Xbox Series systems or the PS5, and when used with a PC or Mac, it can draw power directly from the same USB-C cable used for a display, making for a clean single cable setup or even acting as a second screen for a laptop. The Series S in particular, I think, makes a very beautiful combo with this, giving you a full functioning console setup you can fit in a single backpack or taking up minimal space in travel luggage. If you want to learn more about the monitor or maybe even grab one for yourself, check out the link I've got posted down below in the description. And once again, I want to thank Arzopa for sponsoring this part of today's video. Now, the other bit of news, and the thing that is much more unfun, is the fact that Nintendo has announced they are raising the prices on basically everything original Switch related, and a bunch of Switch 2 accessories. The Switch 2 itself, along with games, are for now still untouched. A couple days ago at the start of the month, Nintendo basically did this press release that was like, hey, we're adjusting prices on a whole bunch of our goods. They didn't specify prices at the time just yet, but did say that they would go into effect starting the 3rd, which as of the 3rd, we're now able to see these price increases. And it's relatively minute on a lot of devices, but it's a lot of additions that are just adding up very quickly, especially if you've yet to buy into the ecosystem and you still plan to buy multiples of these. And it's very frustrating for two real big reasons. One, a lot of these items already had a recent price increase from when they were initially announced as part of the Switch 2 reveal and then got bumped up before full launch, and now they're getting bumped up again. And even weirder, older Switch stuff is getting more expensive, including the hardware itself by a pretty healthy amount. While the Switch 2 is still going to be $450 for the system itself and $500 for a bundle with a game, the original Switch line of systems are all seeing an over 10% increase in price. The Switch Lite is going from $200 to $230, the regular Switch is going from $300 to $340, and the Switch OLED model is going from $350 to $400, making it only $50 less than getting a Switch 2. On top of that, numerous accessories are increasing in price. The original Switch Pro controller, for instance, used to be $70, now it's going to be $80. And then for the Switch 2, again, smaller bump, but it's after a bump we already received. A whole bunch of stuff is going up $5 to $10 a piece. The dock is now going for $125. Joy-Cons are now a full-blown $100. The Pro controller was $85 and is now $90. And even the NSO retro style controllers are seeing increase in prices. For instance, the GameCube controller used to be $65 and is now $70. Now again, the Switch 2 itself is one of the few bits of hardware that is not seeing a price increase, which leads to a couple different thoughts. One, I do think this is Nintendo attempting to stave off increasing the Switch 2 price by basically making everything else more expensive, which is cool, but also sucks because now everything else is more expensive. It's also extremely bizarre in that it makes the older system options, which normally would drop in price by this point, way less attractive to people, and as a result, are probably just gonna end up sitting on store shelves, or at least more than would have otherwise. Normally, last-gen systems go down in price when the new one comes out. People are going to pick that up. You get a little last boost and get those shelves cleared off. Now when you're looking at stuff like the regular Switch, you're just over $100 away to just getting a Switch 2, which ends up being, by far the much better value. The Switch Lite, to an extent, kind of holds up, I think, just because it is, half the price of a Switch 2, but that's also a handheld-only system, and I think a lot of people had trouble reconciling that even when it was at $200, so it's just a very bizarre move that we're seeing these 8-year-old systems, in the case of the original one at least, now increasing in price rather than going down. This also makes me think that while Nintendo has held off on increasing the price of the Switch 2 for now, it is an inevitability. It is not a question of if, it is a question of when. After all, this is sadly just the route that all the major hardware manufacturers have gone lately. Both PlayStation and Xbox have increased the prices of their system internationally as well as now in the US. And while it is ultimately up to Nintendo to choose to raise the price, it is in reaction to a reality that all the companies have been having to deal with. I don't want to necessarily instill some kind of like FOMO or panic buying where it's like, oh god, go buy a Switch 2 now before they're $800. It's not going to jump up insanely like that, but it could easily end up going up, 30, 40, even $50, reaching all the way to $500 without a game included like we're seeing right now. Add on to that how every single accessory has gone up $5 to $10. It is a total investment of getting into this console that is just getting larger and larger as time goes by, which is such a frustrating reality compared to years of being used to things, getting cheaper as time went by. It's so utterly frustrating, but something that I think people do need to be aware of. So those are just my thoughts on a couple of pretty important pieces of news to come out of Nintendo the past couple days. Again, I do have a link to their survey about physical games down below. I highly recommend filling that out. There is also, of course, that link for Arzopa. Thanks again to them for sponsoring today's video. Click on that as well if you want to check out the monitor for yourself. As always, if you enjoyed this video, hit the thumbs up button to let me know, subscribe if you haven't yet, and I will see you all later.